Hello friends. This is Percy in Goddess Fiction. How are you all? So in this video, we will see what if Percy went in God of War and fell in love with daughter of God of War. But before we start, if you want more amazing stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also, if possible, share this video. I really should have guessed that the world would be in danger when I finally get through a year in high school without any hiccups. But since the fall of Kronos and his ultimate plan of world domination and the fall of the gods, nothing majorly disastrous has happened, except the time I arrived 10 minutes late for this one date I had with Annabeth, and she could give an angry Nico a run for his money. So I wasn't expecting anything, and that's a big mistake when you have the life of a demigod. What can I say? I was excited, getting through this year of good high school just so I could finally get back to Camp Half-Blood without being surrounded by the new recruits asking if it was true that I fought a minotaur in the girls' locker room, or if I battled a hydra while on hall monitor duty, or even if I sliced open my math teacher's head for giving me an F. Don't know where that rumor came from. Returned home without any trouble along the way. My mom and Paul were out with some friends for the day, so I was upset I couldn't say bye to them before leaving for the summer. And whereas Facebook would normally solve that problem, we demigods use the age-old method of sending letters to our parents. Don't know why, I find it hard to imagine Furies logging on and creating accounts of Google. I've really got to learn to tidy this place up. It took me a while before I could find Riptide, my pen, sword that has saved my life more times than I could count, as well as my watch shield that has probably saved my life twice as much as that. As well as shoving some extra cloths in the bag. You never know how many pairs of pants or socks will get shredded in training, but you do know it'll be a lot. And finally a necklace with a small heart shape on the front. You can flip it open, and lucky me that I found this specially made one with what mortals thought of as Olympus. And I know what you're thinking, it's not for me, but for Annabeth. I figured she would like this. Although she might start babbling on how the design isn't right or imaginative or something like that. Good thing I got it for a bargain then. After leaving a note for Mum to find saying that I wasn't monster food and I was on my way to Camp Half-Blood, I took the quickest route there by train. It's always best to make your way to camp as quickly and discreetly as possible. And for me it was no exception, because of me being the one to save the world in Olympus. Every monster from New York to the Hollywood sign wants my arm or leg as a chew toy. He's coming. A voice spoke next to me. I turned and was greeted by some lady sitting next to me, probably in her 60s. Very wrinkly and frail, and would give any dentist a cardiac arrest. Her eyes were red, and I mean blood red. I shifted uncomfortably, and lowered my hand into my pocket reaching for Riptide. Fear not, I mean you no harm, son of Poseidon, she hisses. Shush. That's not exactly something I want you call out while in a carriage full of people that could possibly be something else. It matters not. They're the least of your problems now. My fingers laced around Riptide now, ready for some kind of attack. She finally turned to me, her eyes piercing into me. It actually felt like my brain was having a meltdown. I told you already, I mean you no harm. Do you want me to burn that statement into your thick skull? I tried to keep the attention away from us, and lowered my voice to stop anyone else around us from hearing. If you don't want to hurt me, then why are you here? He is coming, and you are the only one who can stop him. Who is coming? I asked. The warrior, the servant, the god, the destroyer. Hold on, are we still talking about one guy, or is there? You must be ready. She interrupts more harshly now, her voice going rasp. The gods have faced this foe before, and were defeated. And now you are the only one who will stop him from plunging the world into chaos again. What do you mean again? Who are you talking about? You'll know soon enough. However, I do ask you to do one thing when you face this foe. Listen to him. That's all she says to me before she gets up and walks out just as the doors for this stop open. Before I could call her back, the doors close and the train was on the move again. Well, at least I can say it wasn't an attack. Still, the foretelling of an attack wasn't exactly the welcoming back present I would have liked. But once I saw Peleus, the guard dragon of Camp Half-Blood, sitting around the pine tree underneath the golden fleece, my mood calmed down knowing that I was back at my favorite place. Out of nowhere I was tackled from behind and giving the hug to end all hugs, and once I could feel the tough fur rubbing against my leg and the sound of hooves filling my ears, I couldn't help but smile and hug back. Grover, don't you know it's never a good idea to sneak up on a demigod? Sorry man, that's what happens when you don't see a satyr in months. You get one heck of a goat hug. He hugged me tightly again, and I thanked the gods for River Styx's invincibility, or Grover might just have crushed me there and then. After he pulled away, he asked me, "So how you been?" I thought about whether I should tell him about my encounter with Witch Hazel and her little doomsday warning, but it's the first day, and I don't really want to greet my friends with a warning of dread. That's happened every single time before. Bored stiff, I replied with half honesty. Have you seen Annabeth anywhere? He crossed his arms and sarcastically pouted at me. Only hung out with me for 20 seconds before already wanting to ditch me to find Annabeth. I'm not ditching you, and like you say, only 20 seconds. We still have the whole summer, unless you've got any search missions coming up. No need to worry, Percy. I'm free for at least a week. You ain't getting rid of me that easy. Good, it's great to see you again, I said. It was incredible to see how packed the camp had become since I was last here. Dozens of new demigods I had never met before, nearly all of them taking up the volleyball courts. Guess they were trying to hold off from doing any of the training for as long as possible. And it wasn't hard to understand why, as Clarice was leading the training session, and just because some of her combatants were new doesn't mean she went easy on them. She finally noticed me and nodded. That's God of War language for your mine in the battle arena later. The new cabins for the minor gods had finally been built, which meant Annabeth wasn't around there either. I sighed heavily, probably too heavy because Grover noticed my impatience. Relax, Casanova. She's around here somewhere. He kept grinning, but not in a mocking way, in a way as if he was expecting something to happen. You know, since you tackled me earlier, I've just had this weird feeling that Annabeth is just going to jump out, and I didn't have time to finish my sentence as another figure leapt out of nowhere and tackled me to the ground. I was helpless as two hands grabbed mine and held them to the ground, and I was forced to stare into Annabeth Chase's mesmerizing gray-shaded eyes. Not that I was complaining. You going to finish that sentence, seaweed brain? No need. I was right anyway, I replied back as she leaned down and kissed me lightly on the lips. Normally I would be nervous about these types of things, but not with Annabeth. Get a room, guys, Grover called out. Reluctantly, Annabeth and I pulled away and helped each other up. So how long you been back? I asked her. 2 days ago, would have been sooner if not for the rebuilding of Olympus. But that's going smoothly anyway. Besides, we only went on a date a week ago. You can't stay away from me, can you? She asked cheekily. And is that a bad thing? I grinned. No complaints from me. Grover stepped forward, so we both turned our attention to him. Well, I'm being completely ignored here, and the council are calling me back for some special meeting that they didn't tell me about before. So I'm going to be leaving you two alone. And Annabeth, I still think of myself as Percy's protector, so don't do anything with him you shouldn't. Grover, I snapped at him as he quickly darted out of the way of my attempted kick before trotting off. I was now trying to avoid eye contact with Annabeth after Grover's little remark there, but I didn't have a choice once again as I felt Annabeth's hand cup mine. He may be your protector, but I'm your girlfriend, so I think that gives me authority to do what I want with you. Should I be scared? I asked sarcastically. Depends. Hopefully your skills with Riptide haven't faltered since saving the world. Me not train with Riptide over the summer. Might as well walk around the city with a board saying, I'm a demigod, please eat me. I chuckled and she did as well. I've never really noticed before, but Annabeth has this kind of enchanting laugh like you want to hear it over and over again. It was good to be back. Everything from training with Annabeth, to kicking Clarice's butt. Although she's convinced she was holding back, having new demigods come up to me asking me for pointers on how to not die, and even the dinner with my friends. I realized that Nico wasn't around, probably off to find other children of the gods or something. The day went quicker than I wanted it to, and soon it was just Annabeth and I sitting by Fireworks Beach, watching as the sun went down and the moon replaced it in the sky. This, in my humble opinion, is what I describe as a perfect moment. The cool breeze cherishing my face, the sea waves hitting the shore calmly with the sounds soothing my eardrums. But the best bit has to be having Annabeth sitting next to me, our fingers laced together and not letting go anytime soon. You know, Annabeth started. I think it was at a beach, when I really discovered my architectural skills. I remember when I was about 6. I would build the best sandcastles and all the kids would be jealous. Never would have dreamed that about 10 years later I would be helping redesign Olympus. That certainly is a big leap, wise girl, I said. But now every time that I think about, I just find it ironic that when I might have first realized I was different, was on a beach where the sea was perfect. Wonder if the gods were trying to imply something there, she grinned. Maybe. I first realized I was different at a museum, although I didn't really have time to think about it considering my teacher turned into a fury before my eyes and was trying to bite off my head. And that's when Annabeth gives me that laugh again, and thinking it over, maybe the gods were trying to imply something considering how she and I knew we were different from things of personal value to us. Then I remembered my gift to her. Oh yeah, I got this for you. I brought out the necklace from my pocket. Her face lit up instantly. Oh wow, it's beautiful. And that's not the best part, I said as I opened the heart locket showing the picture of fake Olympus inside. I know it's not the real deal, but I guess the mortals were afraid of our parents throwing a lawsuit. You seriously think I care about that? I love it. She beams now. She turns and lifts her hair up for me to hook it around and lock it in place. After it was tightly fixed on, Annabeth pounced on top of me and started a kissing frenzy once more. For someone who's clueless about other people's feelings as well as his own, you sure are romantic. I'm not clueless, I defended, but she gave me this look as if she knew I wasn't speaking honestly. I'm slow, but not clueless. Percy, Annabeth, our moment was interrupted as we could hear Grover calling for us frantically. Got to admit, the G-Man has great timing. I whispered to Annabeth as she got off me. We both stood just as Grover came sprinting towards us, and I mean sprinting as if he was hypnotized into thinking he was Usain Bolt. He stopped in front of us, and was so out of breath he couldn't get the words out of his mouth. Slow down, Grover, what's going on? I asked. You both need to get back to the big house, now. He didn't even wait for an answer as he ran back towards the big house. Not really having much of a choice, the two of us followed. Soon enough we made it back. Just as every demigod in the camp was waiting outside, this meant something on the line of code red emergency for us. Chiron, in centaur fashion, trotted around making sure that everyone was present before addressing us. We have called you all back here because we have heard that there is a new threat against the gods and the world. A threat that once before almost destroyed the world. The talk with creepy old hag races back into my mind, and I couldn't help but feel stupid for thinking it was nothing and not telling anyone about it before. As effective immediately, Chiron continued. No one is permitted to leave Camp Half-Blood at all, until this matter is resolved. What exactly is the matter? Travis Stoll called out. Yeah, his younger brother, Connor, continued. Which Titan is trying to destroy the world now? Why not just send Team Percy Jackson and the Demi-Argonauts after them? Other campers actually considered this, although I really wasn't sure about the title. However, Chiron's mood didn't lighten one bit as he spoke back to the Stoll brothers directly. This is not a joking matter, boys. This is very serious. And it is not a Titan that is the cause. More gossip followed between the campers. This was too much for me. After that woman warned me I should have done something about it. I stepped forward, much to the surprise of Annabeth and Grover, and approached Chiron. Then what are we facing? Chiron's gaze fell to the ground, before taking in the look of everyone else's upon him. I didn't want to put him on the spot like this, but I had to know what this new threat is, and how the gods have faced it before. Chiron takes one last look at me before shouting to the other campers again. It is Kratos. Kratos has returned. It was as if Hades had just appeared in the camp and told everyone we were to be his personal slave and would have to wake up every morning to the sight of him mooning us, something that would make a time in Tartarus feel like a Hawaiian vacation. Everyone was in a panic. Spreading rumors, sharing whispers, each word that filled the air stank of fear. I hated that feeling. After announcing what the trouble was, Chiron continued with his speech. So now you know, no one is to go anywhere near the camp borders. And there will now be a curfew, everyone in bed by 10. No exceptions, this is very serious. Anyone breaks these orders and survives, will have to clean the stables till next summer. What, hold on, who is Kratos? I asked. But Chiron was already on the move, heading off to talk to Mr. D, and everyone else was actually following his order and already heading to their parents' cabins. I turned back hoping that Annabeth would answer my question, however only Grover was behind me now. Still, at least he must know. Grover, who is Kratos? Percy, we really shouldn't talk about, either you tell me or I'm just going to use our link to read your mind and find out myself. Grover groaned in frustration. I could tell he was silently praying to Zeus to strike him with a bolt of lightning to stop him from telling me. Although the worried expression he got meant he was afraid that Zeus might hear him. He wants answers, goat boy. Clarice told him from behind me. I'm now afraid for another reason. Clarice was trying to help me get an answer from my best friend, never would have seen that coming. Or I could always just tell him the story. Fine. I get goosebumps mixed with fleas whenever I think about this story, but not here. Clarice dragged G-Man and I to the armory. No one was there so we wouldn't get any disturbances. Every second that went by I didn't know who this guy was, the more afraid I became. He was obviously well known and feared, even Clarice I could tell was hiding something. And what about Annabeth? It's not like her to just run off like that. Once inside, Clarice checked outside once more before locking the door behind her. Trapped in a room full of weapons and Clarice with no supervision other than Grover wasn't exactly one of my favorite experiences, and in this moment I was actually fearful for my life and Grover's. However, she just simply leaned against the door and spoke softly. So you really have no clue who Kratos is, do you? I shook my head, causing Clarice to smirk at me like she knew I had no clue anyway. When I first heard of him, I just always thought he was a demigod boogeyman. How if you didn't pass your camp half-blood assignments he'd come out from under the bed and slit your throat? Nice. I muttered sarcastically while Grover chewed nervously on a can he had in his pocket. But he was very real. Apparently he was once a Spartan warrior, in fact the leader, until he was finally defeated in battle. He made a plea to one of the gods, and he became a slave to them. Following their order, although not out of the kindness of his blood-soaked heart. Soon enough he became one of the gods, but was killed by Zeus. Why? I was getting to that maggot head. She sneered. Kratos once opened Pandora's box, and the evil in the box poisoned the gods of Olympus. Kratos fought his way out of Tartarus, made an alliances with the Titans and practically tore down Olympus, killing almost all the gods. What? I stuttered in shock. He'd killed the gods, my dad. How can he? Gods are like monsters, over time they return. Grover tried to calm me down. No, it's just, how can one man do all that? What happened to him? If he's a warrior from ancient times, how is he still alive? Well, he was supposedly killed in the battle, and never heard from again, at least until tonight. And his return is about to end. She hissed as she walked over to the weaponry and grabbed a handful of spears and swords, and stuffing them into the closest bag to her. Grover and I shared a look that showed how shocked we were by this. Clarice, are you out of your mind? No, I'm actually thinking quite clearly. I'm going to kill this guy myself. That's the out of your mind part. He's killed the gods, our parents, maybe your dad. Why do you want to fight him yourself? Because the god that gave him his power in the first place was my dad. She yelled at me. And then the god he replaced was my dad. He brought shame to him, and I'm going to make him suffer 10 times over. That was all it needed. Just that excuse for Clarice to jump to the chance of fighting this Kratos. Even with how strong she is, and with the blessing of her father. Now that I know he not only defeated but replaced him, I was more concerned for her now. I can't believe I just said I was concerned for her. The paranoia is getting to me. She finished packing her weapons and made way for the door, but I wasn't going to let her. I jumped in her way and stood in front of the door. If it weren't Clarice who I was ticking off, Grover would have helped, but instead he just trotted around worried, looking like he was about to throw up the can again. Get out of my way, Clarice said to me. I'm not letting yourself get killed. As if Ares didn't have enough reasons to kill me, he wouldn't like it if I let you walk into a suicidal mission. You think just because of your dip in the river Styx you can stop me from doing what I want? If that's what it takes, guys. Grover called out. If you are going to brawl, can I stand outside? I don't want to get mixed up in this. Just then another voice called out. You should have thought of that before you decided to help out friends who turned out to be the offspring of the gods. The voice was sarcastic, feminine and very familiar. And out of the corner of the room, emerged 2 familiar faces. Talia, Nico, it's great to see you. I greeted and hugged them both, followed by Grover, although he mostly gave Nico a handshake. What are you doing here? I think you might have heard. Nico said. Don't tell me you're both after Kratos too. Okay, we won't tell you. Talia taunted playfully, but turned serious quickly. Artemis and the hunters have been searching high and low, since the first sighting by Hermes yesterday. There hasn't been another sighting. But he's here, and we intend to stop him. So why aren't you with the hunters? What other demigod do we know with powerful friends, having bathed in the river Styx, gaining almost complete invincibility and power, and has a knack of always finding the problem one way or the other? You want me to help you find Kratos? I asked as if they were mad, which at the moment I think they are. Percy, you don't have to do this. But you have the best chance of defeating him if the gods fail. Our parents weren't in the best condition back then, but Kratos is violent and powerful. He could kill thousands of people if they got in the way. Talia's voice was filled with dread at the thought of it, and I could only imagine and then almost black out at the horror. Clarice smirked. Good luck trying to stop all of us then. I sighed heavily knowing my options were slim to none. These were my friends however, I've gone through the underworld and back for most of them. I can do the same when fighting someone that could kill them. All right, I'm in. Talia and Nico nodded and smiled, glad that I was now on the team, and I don't think it'd be unfair to say we were the underdogs. Nico walked over to the weaponry to pick up extras, while Talia addressed me. Is Annabeth around? She was, but then once she heard about Kratos I haven't seen her. Talia's eyes shirted uncomfortably, and it looked like she just cursed herself for asking the question. She tried to walk around me, but I stopped her now interested in what bugged her. What is it? Nothing. If Annabeth doesn't want to come that's fine. Why wouldn't Annabeth want to come if she knew we're going? Ah Hades, Talia grunted and looked at me sincerely. You should talk to Annabeth. Worrying about Annabeth couldn't even begin to describe how I felt when I realized Annabeth was nowhere in sight. She wasn't back at the Athena cabin, she wasn't at Fireworks Beach, and she wasn't even at the arts and crafts where she would normally hang out when she wasn't in a good mood. I felt like tearing my hair out, gluing it back to my scalp and then tearing it out again. Where could she have gone? Percy. My heart jumped for joy for a split second, however that wasn't Annabeth's voice, it was Talia running up to me. I can't find her anywhere, I told her frantically. Damn it, I should have seen this coming. Why? What does this have to do with Annabeth? Nothing, but she hesitated from saying anything else like it was a taboo. What? Tell me. Her mom, Athena. She tried to trick Kratos once into giving her the powers of Pandora's box so she could rebuild the world. But in doing so it meant she helped Kratos storm Olympus and kill the gods. I've never really liked Athena that much, but this was on another level. To kill the other gods for her own benefit. No wonder Annabeth would be upset knowing what her mother had done. And that's when it dawned on me where she might be. You don't think she's... I wish I could say she's wiser than that, but she's also too proud to let this consume her. She's gone to kill Kratos herself. Are we there yet? You're not seriously going to do that, are you? Talia said to Grover. I can always snap his neck. Clarice suggested, earning looks off each of us. I won't kill him, sure you won't be able to talk, and he'll find it hard to breathe, but he won't die. Well, the dying part doesn't seem so bad now if that was the other option, Grover stated. Guys, can we focus? I told them and continued forward. It was almost pitch black, and making our way through a dense forest didn't help our cause. At this point in our lives, sneaking out of Camp Half-Blood was like taking a dip into the sea for me. It was almost turning into a habit. But we had to hurry. Who knows where Annabeth is now? What if she's already found Kratos? Or he's found her? What if she's already... I almost threw up at the thought. Percy, Nico patted my shoulder, forcing me to look at him. Look, Annabeth has already done one stupid thing by going alone. But her making two stupid decisions in 1 day is near impossible. She's going to be fine. I'm not so sure. What if she's letting her pride cloud her judgment? She's not thinking straight. Why couldn't she have waited for us? I threw my backpack to the ground in frustration and slumped down on my knees. Talia moved to the front of the group. Okay, it's getting too dark to do anything now. We'll camp here for the night. Good, Grover gasped. My legs are killing me. You have hooves. Clarice pointed out. You should be more adapted to walking than us. Well, you have all the god bloodline and training to help. I miss my crutches right now. Soon enough, we managed to set up a campfire, although not too big so not to draw any unwanted attention. And thanks to Talia's time with the hunters, she was able to use some of the trees around us and take the branches, building defensive posts along with Clarice's help. Although they had to get Grover's permission to cut down the branches, well, he is following in the footsteps of Pan. At least he was trying to do his job. What am I doing at the moment? Sitting down, panicked out of my skin thinking about Annabeth. Is she scared? Is she lost? It's quite cold tonight. What if she's cold? And those are just the minuscule problems. There's the main one of a god killer out there that she's looking for. I silently pray to the gods to give her some kind of protection, but they're all probably too busy trying to handle the situation themselves. "How you doing?" Talia asked as she sat down next to me. "I feel terrible," I replied honestly. "Don't worry, we'll find her. Annabeth is one of the bravest and smartest people I know, if not the most. She can look after herself, believe me, I know." I nodded, agreeing with her, but that didn't help that empty feeling in my stomach. I just needed to concentrate on our mission, the reason we left, to face this Kratos. I turned to Talia. Did Kratos kill him as well?" She gulped and hesitated for a few seconds before answering. "Your father apparently fought well, but Kratos defeated him as well." That's when I lost my eye contact with her and looked into the distance at nothing. My hands were trembling for the first time since our battle with Kronos. Talia nudged me in the arm, forcing me to look at her. "The gods weren't themselves, Percy. They were consumed by fear and darkness. And, as much as I hate to say it, I'm glad Kratos defeated them." "What?" I yelped in shock and anger. "How could you say that?" "Guess I just have a mental sibling understanding." I froze up as soon as she said that. "Sibling? He's your brother?" "Half-brother, he's a son of Zeus," she said. "Percy, the gods were poisoned. If Kratos didn't stop them, who knows what would have happened. We might not have even been born." I had to admit, she did make sense, but although I've never really had a good reason for defending the gods other than the fact that their family and the foes are more evil, it's just crushing to think that they have been killed, my dad. And then I remembered something else the old woman said on the bus about listening to Kratos when the time comes. Is that mean to imply that he has his own side of the story I should listen to? Well, if this guy is as dangerous as everyone makes him out to be, hopefully I'll live long enough to hear his side of the story. Eventually everyone in the group fell asleep apart from me as I decided to take first watch, and I would like it a lot if I stayed awake. If I fall asleep, I'll most likely have my dreams of despair and misery, and with Annabeth gone and me not knowing if she was even alright or not, I don't think I'll be able to handle it. However, I could feel my eyes start to get heavy. I've wrestled with minotaurs and titans and I'm losing a battle with my eyelids. I stood up and tried to walk it off, might as well check to see that our perimeter is safe. My legs felt like jelly strangely, and my head felt really faint as well, like I wasn't even awake. Oh crap, please don't tell me I fell asleep without noticing again. I guess the tiredness got the better of me while I was worrying about Annabeth and anyone else that might cross paths with this Kratos. That's when I could defiantly tell I wasn't awake. The air started to heat up, making me sweat, almost drenching myself. And instead of the sweat beads of water making me feel calm and relaxed, they felt like they weighed a ton and were pulling me down to the ground. And then the trees and woodland around me started to melt, like metal would do in an extremely hot room. Soon enough, once they flopped and touched the ground, everything burst into flames. The fire crackled and danced around like sirens at a bachelorette party. I tried to run back to my friends, but I stopped dead in my tracks and almost threw up as I caught the sight of their sleeping bags empty and covered in blood. This is just a dream, none of it is real. Oh yeah, right. I'm a demigod, from crying out loud. Almost everything I dream up turns real. Why can't we ever get good dreams of the future? Like what our first car will be, or what next week's lottery numbers are. I backed away slowly, wanting this nightmare to just hurry up and end already. But the nightmare only took a turn for the worst once I heard deep breathing behind me, like some sort of beast, but instead I turn and come face to face with a man, although beast could still fit the description. The guy was all muscle and rage, standing nearly 7 foot tall. His skin was ash white, with red tattoos going along the left side of his chest and left arm. A scar across his eye. But I have to say the thing that frightened me most was the 2 large chain blades he held in his hands. He snarled at me heavily like a wild animal. I reached into my pocket for Riptide only to find it wasn't there. All that could race through my mind now was, this is a dream. None of it is real. None of it is real. But it was really hard to think at the moment as the guy charged full speed and then some right towards me. It felt like my feet were trapped in quicksand. I couldn't move out of the way as his blades slashed towards me right for my neck. Percy! Percy, wake up! Grover shook me violently, leaving me shaking as much as I would be if a titan took a couple of steps, causing an earthquake. I bolted up, my face sweating and my breath was ragged and out of control. You alright, man? My protector asked me. Yeah, I replied weakly. Just a nightmare. So then you aren't alright? Clarice muttered sarcastically. Nico kneeled down next to me. What was the nightmare about? You know who? I couldn't fight back no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't. I'm serious guys, if this guy is anything like my nightmare and what everyone's talking about, we might have to give it everything we've got to beat him. We're screwed. Talia spoke out. That wasn't the encouragement I had in mind, I told her. Not that. She hissed back as she inspected the ground. Rubbing her hand against the soil and smelling it, she looked around the dense forest for a second before turning to us. Someone was here, recently, and they were human, or at least in the shape of a human. Annabeth? I asked hopefully, not unless she took steroids. Oh man, this isn't good. Grover just expressed the thoughts of all of us, well not including Clarice who already had her spear out and battle gear on. Don't ask how she manages to get her war equipment in a little rucksack, she's just had tons of experience. The rest of us got our weapons out. Grover with a dagger in one hand and his reed in the other, Nico with his sword, and Talia had her trusty bow and arrow aimed and waiting for the next thing that moved. We formed a circle back to back, looking at all angles. If Kratos was nearby, he'd surely get some sense that we were here. One demigod walking around is like our paws walking past a mob of fangirls. He'd get noticed in a heartbeat. 4 demigods and a satyr might bring more than what we wanted to the slaughter. Something's coming, Talia said as our guard rose, but still we couldn't see anything, and that wasn't a surprise really with what happened next. As something appeared out of nowhere right in front of me. Literally appeared out of nowhere like they were invisible before. If it were anyone else, they would have struck instantly, but this person was wise to appear before me because she knows I would never attack her. Annabeth. I gasped out as I ran to hug her like there was no tomorrow. She looked like she had just crawled through hell and back. Well, okay, we've done similar things, but this time she really looks banged up. Her sleeves were completely shredded off, revealing scars and bruises along both arms. Her lip was cut and bleeding a little, and she had a large gash going across her forehead which was bleeding also. Are you out of your Athena damned mind? How could you go off on your own like that? I'm sorry Percy, she said. I wanted to defeat Kratos myself. Doing so may have forgiven my mother for what she's done in the past. The other gods still haven't fully forgiven her for tricking Kratos into doing what he did. That desire to do my mother proud made me lost track, and it was only when I caught up with Kratos that I realized how stupid I. Whoa, back up, Clarice interrupted. You caught up with Kratos? On your own? And you're still alive? Annabeth raised her Yankees cap, which granted invisibility to those who wear it. I was able to escape thanks to this. What happened? Talia asked her, noticing the blood-stained dagger in her other hand, and her sword attached to her belt was dented and scratched to the point it looked as if a single touch would break it like glass. I caught him. I was able to use the cap to move around and try to strike at different areas. It didn't do anything, even a jab in the neck, and he just shrugged it off like an itch. He's powerful, too powerful for us to take, I think. Well then, Grover said. Who votes to head back to camp and make marshmallows? I agree with Grover. I told the group. Not the marshmallow bit, but we need to head back to camp now that we've got Annabeth. Are you kidding me? Clarice questioned. We're so close to finding him ourselves, and the unwise girl here has probably weakened him at least. No, we're talking about charging up against someone who not only took down our parents but the Titans as well. We're not even battle ready. We don't have to be. With your little invincibility stunt, the hunter's skill, Dead Boy's army of darkness shtick, and the blessings of my father, we can take him. No we can't. I argued with her. Guys. Grover mumbled, but Clarice and I were still too busy arguing. Just because you saved all Olympus and the world, doesn't mean you get to tell me what to do. Guys, I don't have to tell you what to do, I'm just warning you that if you go off and try to face him on your own, you'll be likely to end up in a morgue very soon. Guys, well in that case we can just have Neo here bring me back. Nico. He corrected her. Whatever, Clarice spat at him before turning to me. The shame that man brought to my family has gone on for centuries. He's disgraced the name of Ares, and I'm not going to rest until I find him. Guys. What? We both shouted at him. No need to search, he whimpered and pointed further into the forest. He's already here. We all looked to where Grover was pointing, and I'm sure Clarice would be lying if she said she's just as confident now after getting a good look at the monster of a man that is Kratos. Exactly as he was in my nightmare, except his eyes were an unnatural blood red, and saliva was dripping out of his mouth. A demigod with rabies. Now I've seen it all. He held up his two chained blades and took a step closer to us. He was ready for a fight, and it looks like we're going to have to give it to him. Any plans? Nico asked me. 1. Try to stay alive. Were we going to do anything else? Clarice mumbled in my ear. Even as the raging god-killer was charging at us, we still found the time to argue with each other. Nice to know some things will never change. Please let it stay like that for years to come. If I were to rate how terrified I was right now on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being a raging minotaur charging at us, I'd say it would be 10,000 leagues into the cosmos. Kratos charged at us with intense ferocity. We barely even had a chance to avoid his blitz, splitting into different directions as his blades hacked away at anything within his reaching distance. Luckily, everyone had managed to dodge his attacks, but that was only most likely a taster of what he had in store for us. His foot stamped into the ground as he skidded to a halt, causing shockwaves in the ground until he was finally able to stop and turn in our direction. I reached into my pocket and quickly pulled out Riptide. Everyone else had his or her weapons ready. I should have known that Clarice would be the first to strike. She pulled out a large spear from the strap on her back, hoisted it up with her arm before stepping forward and throwing it at Kratos with all her might. I mistook the spear for a bullet, it was moving so fast. I believed there would be no way for Kratos to dodge it, but he didn't need to. Just as the spear's tip was inches from his face, he reached forward and grabbed it with one hand without flinching. He clenched his fist tightly, and the spear snapped in two like a twig. For a moment, Clarice had a look of utter shock, though that was quickly discarded and she was back to her old, happy angry self as she pulled out a battle axe. Looks like we're going to have to get our hands dirty after all. Not without a plan, I told them and turned to Nico. Can you buy us some time? Even just a minute? He nodded. Even half a minute would be good right now. Just as Kratos was about to make his next attack, Nico held his arm out and focused on the area Kratos was about to bulldoze his way through. His giant foot stamped on the ground, practically sinking into it when suddenly half a dozen decayed hands reached out and held him in place. He let out a roar and raised his blade, about to lop off the hands until more skeletal corpses sprung up like excited rabbits and jumped him. He tried to shake all of them off, but more and more weighed him down until he couldn't be seen anymore. I thought football with the guys at Camp Half-Blood was intense, but this was on another level. Grover stamped his foot frantically. Right. What's the actual plan? Does he have any weaknesses? I asked everyone, hoping someone would answer. I'm not sure, Annabeth replied. Talia held steady onto her bow with an arrow equipped. If he does, we might have to discover it for ourselves. That's what I was afraid of, I mumbled. In a blinding flash of light, the corpses holding Kratos down were shattered into 100 pieces as the muscled behemoth turned into a tornado of fire and carnage. We all had to cover our eyes to stop from being blinded and held steady as the force of his attack pushed us back. If it were this bad staying at a distance from this move, I'd hate to be caught in the middle of it. His blades destroyed all of Nico's minions, unfortunate to be close enough. Once they had been taken care of, he stopped spiraling, pressed his heel into the ground and leapt forward quicker than any of us could react. Bam! Before I knew what hit me, he front kicked me so powerfully in the stomach, I was sent flying backwards. It felt like all my inside had been kicked out of me. I thought I was going to vomit in midair. I probably did. I was only stopped when I crashed into the trunk of a nearby tree, almost breaking it as I collapsed to the ground. I had just enough time to weakly lift my head up to see what was happening. Annabeth had unsheathed her dagger and jabbed at Kratos' neck, only for him to grab her by the wrist and toss her to the side like nothing. She ended up crashing right into Grover, and the two of them skipped along the ground like a stone on water. Talia shot consecutive arrows one after the other, hoping to land a single hit. However, Kratos blocked each and every attack with his blades. The arrows bounced off his weapon and flew harmlessly away. As she distracted him, Clarice and Nico, who had drawn his sword, charged him from behind. With lightning reflexes, Kratos not only noticed them but also refused to block Talia's next arrow, which embedded itself in his chest, and thrust his elbows back, hitting both Clarice and Nico in the chest. They coughed up a mixture of saliva and blood and sailed backwards, crashing to the ground. It was like he didn't even realize Talia had shot him in the chest before he turned his attention back to her. Extending his chain, he whipped his blade in her direction, almost cleaving her in two. Talia had managed to jump up in the nick of time and avoid the attack, which made short work of the tree behind her, slicing it like a hot knife through butter. Kratos wasn't done yet. With a flick of his wrist, his chain curved and waved like an incoming tsunami, reaching closer for Talia, who was still coming down from her high jump, until it wrapped itself around her ankle. She barely even had a chance to cut the chain before Kratos pulled on it and slammed her into the ground. The chain uncoiled from her ankle and he pulled it back as Talia tried to get her bearings and picked herself up from the ground. We were getting picked apart. I had to move quickly, otherwise Talia would be the first of his victims, as he started to march towards her still fragile body. I picked myself up and sprinted towards them. Kratos towered over my friend and raised his blade, ready to deal the finishing blow with Talia too weak to block his attack. When I was close enough to them, I pressed my watch and activated my shield. Sneaking in between the gap, I stood over Talia and held up my shield as his blade smashed down onto me. It was amazing I wasn't turned into a pancake after that. I held as strongly as I could as Kratos pushed down on me with tremendous strength. It felt like my shield was going to break in two as he pushed harder and harder, and I tried to keep my legs from turning into jelly. It was bad enough that I was trying to stop him from cutting me down the middle, but if I falter now, then Talia would also die. I can't, no, I won't allow that. Forcing all my strength into my right arm, I used that to hold up my shield and protect us from his attack, while I used my other arm to pull out Riptide and strike. He saw it coming down. I felt relieved because he was no longer pushing his weight down on me. Instead, he lowered his arm and grabbed the edge of my shield and lifted it up over his head, with me still attached to it. I went up and over his head before he tossed me to the ground behind him. Who'd have thought pro wrestlers took inspiration from Spartans? He approached me as I tried to get back up. As he was getting closer, something shot above me from behind. Bam! Bam! Kratos got a nasty surprise in the shape of two hooves imprinted in his cheek. Grover jumped off him and landed back down, looking hopeful for a brief second, until he saw that his kicks had done nothing but tick off Kratos even further. His blood-red eyes, which appeared to be glowing at this point, stared down at Grover with a fiery intensity. The satyr gulped loudly and held out his hands. You know, you seem like an upstanding guy. I'm sure if we sit down and talk this out. Bam! That was as far as Grover got before Kratos punched him in the stomach and sent him crashing into me. We both rolled along the ground for a moment. If I looked close enough, I think I could see the stars floating around Grover's head. The tattooed maniac dashed towards us until a dagger flew in his direction. He weaved his head out of the way, just avoiding it, as it only left a small scar across his cheek. Annabeth came from behind, charged towards him and started attacking her with her sword. She unleashed an awe-inspiring flurry of strikes and blows against him, which he blocked effortlessly with his dual blades. She never used the same move twice, always twisting her body, and changing her tactics every few seconds in the hopes of catching him off guard. But it was no use. His responses were too quick, even for her. I was helpless to watch as he blocked another one of her attacks, and she was wide open for him to counter. Thankfully, Clarice arrived in the nick of time to block his attack with her axe. Bam! It was too late for Kratos to notice Clarice throw back her fist and punch Kratos in the stomach. With how defined his six-pack looked, it must have felt like punching a brick wall. But if anyone could punch through a brick wall, it would be Clarice. Kratos stumbled back momentarily, giving the two girls a chance to stand together and ready themselves. How about it? Brains and bronze to take this guy down? She encouraged. Sounds like a plan, Annabeth responded with a smile, and the two charged at Kratos together. Despite the two of them working so well in sync, he continued to parry and block each of their attacks. I was starting to believe that this guy was unbeatable. Then again, if he was here now after all these years and all his battles in the past, maybe he was. On your feet, Percy. I felt someone lift me back up onto my feet, slowly and gently so not to damage me further if I had any broken bones. Honestly, I was hurting all over, so I couldn't tell. Once I was back up, Nico checked on the still dazed Grover, patting him firmly across the face to try and drag him back to reality. Hate to say it, but I really wish we could call our parents right about now. I hate to agree with him, but it's true, Kratos was toying with us at this point. Especially when he blocked both of Annabeth and Clarice's attacks and held them in place. Whilst the two were breathing heavily, Kratos looked like he could keep this up all day. Before anyone could blink, he let go of his blades and grabbed both girls by their heads before banging them together and throwing them to either side. He did this so quickly, that he grabbed the handle of his weapons before they touched the ground. My heart stopped as I saw the two of them lay on the ground on either side of him, desperately trying to get back up. My eyes were drawn on Annabeth, hoping that she wasn't too badly injured, but then I noticed something in the distance behind her. Through the trees, I had felt something calling me, like a faint whisper that tickles your ear so daintily you think it's a fly and try to swat it away. Seeing what was calling me with my own eyes though gave me hope that we might stand a chance after all, because just a little further along was a small stream. I think I've just found a way to even the playing field. Whatever you have planned, I'm game, Nico said. He'd managed to get Grover to sit upright, and my protector was semi-conscious. I need to lead him over there. I pointed towards the stream behind Annabeth. Once he saw it, the pieces clicked together in his mind, and he bolted upright and was running in Kratos' direction. I'll get him in position, you help the others. Nico, wait, but it was too late because he was already heading for the rage-fueled monster. I wanted to run after him and stop it, but it was pointless. So I quickly helped Grover back onto his feet. He was shaking and wobbling about like Dionysus pretending he just had a night out, but he was standing, so that was good enough for me, and I rushed to help the others. Meanwhile, Nico hurried over to stand on a tall rock and called out to Kratos, "Hey, big guy, your face is so ugly, it's the reason my dad gets so many visitors." Kratos unleashed a bellowing roar and ran towards his insulter. I don't think Nico could quite believe that actually worked because his look of complete and utter shock was meme-worthy. Not wasting another second, he turned and ran towards the stream, with Kratos not too far behind. By this point, I had helped Clarice and Talia back onto their feet. We were all battered and bruised, and I could barely find the strength to help them, let alone grapple with a 7-foot muscle head, but if I could get into the water, then I could get myself up to 150%. Annabeth was the closest one to the stream, so she was the last person I had the chance to check on and help. As I assisted her, she rubbed her bruised forehead and almost collapsed on the ground again. I don't know what hurt more, the collision with the ground, or head-butting Clarice. I'm okay, she reassured me. Once the gang was all back together and ready for round 2, we rushed towards the stream, and I prayed to the gods that Nico was still in one piece. I could breathe a sigh of relief when seeing that Nico was still alive, although I don't know for how much longer, as he dashed around in every direction, hoping to dodge all of Kratos' strikes. With another swing of his blade, I was afraid he would land a hit, but luckily Nico rolled underneath it. A wave of water splashed so hard against a rock where Nico once stood, it cracked and rubble was sent flying everywhere. I'd hate to imagine what that would have done to Nico had he been a second slower. However, his luck had run out. As he tried to make a run for it, he ended up tripping over a rock hidden within the stream and fell. Kratos twisted his body around and swung his blade for Nico. We all held our breath, expecting the worst. Talia, on the other hand, had fired an arrow and landed a direct hit on Kratos' hand, catching him by surprise. This was all I needed to save Nico. The stream was only ankle height, but that was more than enough for me to use. Focusing on the body of water around his own body, Nico slides along the surface of the stream. He looked about as surprised as Kratos was. I brought Nico towards shore, safe and out of harm's way. Although, no one's safe if you're within a 100-mile radius of a guy like Kratos. He pulled the arrow out from his hand and stared at us. With Riptide in one hand and my shield in the other, I turned to Annabeth. "You guys stay back. I don't want to risk anyone else getting hurt." They each looked shocked and unsure, not that I could blame them. Annabeth appeared especially worried. "You don't really think you can take him alone, do you? With this steam, I'll be able to heal myself. If things get too overwhelming for me, then feel free to jump in, but be careful." Clarice folded her arms and smirked. "Should have known you'd find a way to hog all the glory." Even with everything that's happening, I couldn't help but smile, just what I needed before stepping into a potential deathmatch with an absolute killing machine. Annabeth still didn't look convinced, but deep down I think she knew it made the most logical sense. If anything happens to me, I'll at least have a good supply of water to help out, though I'm hoping nothing will happen that would force me to do such a thing. I released a deep breath to calm myself down before walking into the steam, never taking my gaze away from Kratos. His body heaved erratically from the heavy breathing, although I don't believe it was from battle fatigue, as he's still yet to receive any damage from any of us. It's like there's something else going on. He was like a wild animal with no target, all over the place and dangerous to anything standing in his way. I looked into the inferno that was his eyes as I stood firmly and still in the middle of the stream, waiting for him to make the first move. It didn't take long for him to grow impatient and he charged towards me madly. The others waited in anticipation to see what I had in store, or were getting ready to drag my mangled corpse away, hopefully not the latter. Once he was a few yards in front of me, I raised my hand and a geyser shot upwards, trapping Kratos inside. At first, I was afraid I was going to rough on him due to the force of the jet spout until I saw Kratos force himself forward just enough so that he could break through and attack me with his blade. I raised my shield and blocked him, feeling myself getting pushed back as he continued to charge like a minotaur. My arms would have given out by now if I were still on dry land. I willed the water up from the stream and along my body, from tiptoes to my upper body. I felt a new surge of strength engulf me. With this newfound boost, I pressed my heels into the water and used it to push myself back until Kratos was no longer pushing me and we were struggling at an even match. He was taken back by my renewed strength, and this moment's hesitation was all I needed to counter. Bam! I kicked out, hitting him in the ribs and knocking him off balance. I ducked underneath and kicked out again, this time hitting him on the knee and causing him to buckle over. Moving faster than I thought I possibly could, I grasped his face with the palm of my hand and shoved him down into the ground. The back of his head smashed against the bottom of the stream. Finally, we had landed our first decent hit against this guy, though if I were to take him down, it was going to have to be the first of many. Bam! I was caught off guard as he uppercut me in the stomach, knocking me off my feet and into the air. I hurtled backwards and landed with a heavy thud into the water. I sprung up instantly and charged at him again. Before I could reach him, he threw his blade at me. I swayed my body out of the way, causing my body to do a 180 spin. Because of this, I was able to slash Riptide at him. However, he used his other blade to block my attack. I'm in trouble. Bam! He head-butted me square in the face, breaking my nose, and now my eyes were as watery as the stream we were fighting in. I skidded backwards and sank to my knees, with one hand holding me up and the other tending to my heavily bleeding nose. I heard the others call out for me, checking to see if my face hadn't caved in. Thankfully it hadn't, but it sure as Tartarus felt like it. Time was limited, so if I was going to do something about this, I needed to do it now. I dipped my face into my water. Stupid considering that could give Kratos the opening to strike me down, but I couldn't even open my eyes at the moment, so it wasn't like I could be doing much worse. I just needed a second. I lifted my head back up from underneath the shallow surface, just in time to see Kratos leap towards me about to cut my head off, ignoring the latest arrow that Talia had fired into his shoulder. I pivoted my hand to the side, gesturing for the water to follow suit. A large wave appeared out of nowhere and struck Kratos, knocking him away and giving me the time I needed to get my focus back. He turned around just in time to see my face heal and the bleeding stop. That's when something seemed to snap. His eyes bulged open, and he was breathing heavier and quicker through his gritted teeth. At first, I thought he was annoyed that I was still up and ready for more, but this wasn't a look of annoyance he was giving me, it was a look of complete rage. Poseidon. What? I questioned. You, all, he grunted with increasing rage. I waited to see what he was going to do next before he let out another almighty roar of anger towards the sky. I then heard Clarice shout. What did you do, Jackson? I didn't do anything, he just went mad all of a sudden. I called back. Grover cupped his hands together over his mouth and hollered. He's been mad since the start. I know, but matter. Another cry of anger from Kratos focused my attention back towards him, and in the nick of time too. His chained blade was darting towards my face. I leant to one side avoiding the weapon as it sliced a rock behind me in two. I turned back around expecting to find Kratos staring at me, only to find he was gone and the water had splashed upwards. This gave me the idea to look up, and I saw Kratos coming down towards me with a flying kick. I blocked his attack with my shield, but the momentum caused me to slide backwards further down the stream. I pushed him off and he landed back on his own 2 feet. He swung his chain, the blade aimed for my neck. I blocked it with Riptide and knocked it away. Bam! I dashed towards him and shoulder barged him in the chest, powered by a jet of water that rocketed my speed tenfold. He coughed up some spit and looked wounded for a brief second. He pulled back his chains, grabbed both his blades and brought them together to slice me again. I ducked underneath, the force of his slashes cutting the surface of the water behind me. I held firmly to Riptide, about to stab him before he got the better of me. Bam! He kneed me in the stomach, lifting me into the air once again. Bam! Before punching me across the back of my head, causing me to bounce again down the stream. Half my face was buried in the stream. I hate to admit it, but I was beginning to think that I was taking damage faster than I could recover from it. I had to repeat in my mind over and over again that if I keep stalling, I would die. I forced myself back up, just as Kratos was running towards me, ready for more. It was a clash of weapons as Riptide and my shield jeweled with his chained blades. Sparks flew everywhere as we went back and forth between our attacks. I needed to wear him down quickly. He slashed downwards at me, and I jumped out of the way. Bam! I leapt forward and my knee connected with his chin. As I was still above him, I punched him in the chest before spinning around and kicking outwards. Bam! Bam! Both hits landed and he crashed down, causing a crater whilst I glided over him and rolled back down gently into the stream, the water cushioning my landing. He stayed down for much longer than usual. I could finally have a breather as the others cheered me on. Knew you could do it, Perk. Grover hailed. You were the man. Thanks, but it's not over yet, I replied hoarsely. Right on cue, Kratos rolled over and lifted himself back up. The sheer anger that he expressed mere moments ago had calmed to a degree, but he still looked mighty furious. He loomed over me, even with his back hunched forward. His eyes then shifted from me and down to his feet, eyeing the crater that he had caused from the impact. Suddenly, he jabbed both his blades into the cracks beneath the stream. Firstly, I was confused at what he was planning, and then I could watch in disbelief as he began to pull apart both his blades, breaking the crater even further apart. I could feel the very ground shake beneath me. I wobbled about for a moment to try and keep my balance until I noticed the water levels were sinking. He was draining the stream away by splitting the ground underneath. There was a small voice inside me whispering in astonishment at his strength, but that was being drummed out by a louder voice screaming about how much trouble I'm in. The others caught on what was happening, and stared back at me as I turned to them hastily. Has anyone got any other ideas? Annabeth's eyes shifted, telling me she was deep in thought, trying to come up with a new strategy. We were running out of time and options. I could feel the water leave, pouring down the cracks like Kratos had just unplugged the world's largest bathtub. I knew this guy was strong, but this was in another league. I have an idea. Talia's voice broke over the sound of the ground continuing to break. When I looked at her, I could see her glaring down at Kratos while pointing her arm up towards the sky. I stood bamboozled, wondering what she was doing until she yelled once again. And I suggest if you don't want to get fried too, you get out of the water now. Realizing what she had in mind, I didn't need to be told twice. Frantically, I ran towards shore to get out of the way of Talia's secret weapon. She concentrated fully on her target. A thundering noise filled the air, and I jumped up onto shore with the others. Kratos was close to draining all of the steam when Talia thrust her arm down, and a magnificent bolt of lightning shot down from the clouds above and perfectly struck Kratos. The water multiplied the power of the blast. We all watched him yell in defiance as he was engulfed in the lightning before disappearing in a cloud of smoke. I covered my eyes and we all waited in silence. Everything had gone quiet. The stream had dried up completely, leaving behind large cracks and puffs of smoke in its wake. Finally, I could fall to the ground and catch my breath. The others followed my example, enjoying their moment of peace and victory. All except for Clarice, who continued to stare out at what had transpired. That was one of the most awesome things I have ever seen. She stated and held out her fist towards Talia. The huntress rested her hands on her knees, no doubt exhausted from her ultimate attack, but she did take the time to let out a light giggle and fist-bumped Clarice. Next to me, Annabeth sunk to her knees, breathing heavily and leaning over me as I lay on my back. She stared down at me with a thankful grin. You did it. We did it. And let's promise to never do something like this again. Is that an early retirement announcement? Grover asked me sarcastically. 'Cause if it is, I'm joining you. I shared a chuckle with my best friend and Annabeth, only a little one because my body was aching every time I laughed. I was going to need a long dip in the Camp Half-Blood Lake once we got back. Before long, Nico's low, troubled voice caught our attention. Guys. I looked over to see him pointing in the direction of the stream, his face paler than usual with a worried look. Oh no, that could only mean one thing. I lifted myself up into a sitting position and stared out into the distance. The smoke from the lightning strike was clearing up, making it easier to see Kratos standing upright and unmoved. His body was scorching and looked pretty damaged, to say the least, but he was still up and breathing. Talia let out the heaviest sigh. What do we have to do to take this guy down? That's the million drachma question, Clarice replied. Annabeth and I exchanged another look. My body was past its limit, and without a steady supply of water, I wasn't going to be of much help. He may be alive, but he's weakened. We've just got to push a little more, she said, confidently masking the doubt I could pick up in her voice. I might be able to do something, Grover said as he pulled out his reed from his pocket. Clarice scoffed. What, you're going to lullaby him to sleep? For once, Grover didn't respond with a sarcastic remark or apology towards her, instead opting to ignore her and began playing a peaceful tune from his little musical instrument. At first, I sincerely thought he was trying to sing Kratos to sleep, especially as the Spartan slowly turned around to face us once again. He was slowly, and clearly worn down, but not as much as we were. So whatever Grover had planned, it was our last line of defense. Nothing appeared to be happening, and the seconds were passing too quickly as Kratos gained speed. We all got ready to defend ourselves, when suddenly branches erupted from the ground beneath Kratos and ensnared around his legs, coiling upwards. Not only that, but the branches and vines of the forest trees and plant life around us also extended themselves and wrapped around Kratos like a gang of snakes on an unsuspecting meal. He shook the first few branches off, breaking through them with relative ease. But soon they became too many and too thick for even him to destroy. Grover didn't stop playing, not until the only thing remaining unwrapped was Kratos' head as he was held firmly in place. If he was at full strength, this wouldn't have worked, but it looks like we'd injured him enough to find a way to stop him in his tracks. He continuously jerked his body despite it becoming apparent he wasn't going to break free anytime soon. Nice work, Grover, I applauded. I got back onto my feet, helped by Annabeth. I stared down at the trapped Kratos, and he stared back intensely. So what do we do now? Clarice was too happy to answer. I take his head, and mount it in my cabin. Whilst I doubt Clarice would be allowed to do that, I knew that if we did return to our parents with him, he would surely be killed. Is that really what we want to happen? Then I remembered something else from earlier today, the old creepy lady who foretold of Kratos' attack. It couldn't have been a coincidence. There had to be more to this story, and there were still too many unanswered questions about this whole matter. And the lady from before told me to listen to him. Did she really mean listen to Kratos? I mean, he doesn't seem like the talkative type, but there's no one else to listen to. Wait, I called out and everyone stopped in his or her tracks. Let's ask him a few questions first. Did he smash what little bit of rational sense you had left? Annabeth gasped at me, clearly approving of my call. The others weren't too enthused either. Now I'm starting to understand why you have the nickname Seaweed Brain. Clarice said. She twirled her weapon in her hand, impatiently waiting to disembowel the brutish juggernaut still ensnared in the vines, although seemingly too dazed to try and break free. I felt someone place a firm hand on my still numb shoulder. I turned to see Grover looking uncharacteristically calm. Percy, you are my best friend, and I will always respect your decision-making and follow you to the ends of Tartarus itself. Proven by the fact that I have done so on multiple occasions by this point. So, that is why right now, I must respectfully ask as a friend. He paused, before exploding at the top of his lungs. Are you crazy? Well, I think I'm now deaf in one ear because of that outburst. I batted his arm away and walked over to the group and Kratos, turning around to address them all. I wasn't winning their approval, not that I could blame them considering what we just went through and because everyone still had fresh cuts and bruises from our scuffle. Guys, I know that this seems stupid. Oh no, Clarice grunted, cutting me off. We expect stupid from you. You've based your whole demigod career around being stupid. This is stupid to the point where our parents would look up from Olympus and pray for your well-being. I ignored her and continued to plead my case. Just hear me out. Earlier today, before we had even heard about Kratos rampaging, this old woman on a train told me about him. She said I should listen to him. Once again, Clarice couldn't keep her mouth shut. So we're supposed to risk our lives because of a chat you had with some old hag. If there were any part of the stream left, I probably would have crashed a wave over Clarice so that I could say my piece without being interrupted. However, it was actually Annabeth who stepped forward and spoke up next. What did this woman say? Right on cue, Clarice bellowed. No, of all people, I wouldn't have expected to be the first to buy this. Annabeth turned sharply to face Clarice. I'm just considering all of our options here. It would be unfair to cast Percy's idea away like that. If he needs to say something, we should listen. Just watching her argue and plead for my sake caused my cheeks to flush and my heart to skip a beat. When has Percy ever led us astray? Should I give you that list by time of occurrence, or in alphabetical order? The warrior woman responded sarcastically. I huffed, unable to contain my frustration. All this time we're spending arguing is another second closer to Kratos regaining full consciousness and the chance to break free and wear our entrails as trophies. I looked to the others, seeing that they weren't as reluctant as Clarice but still appearing very cautious. Percy, Nico mumbled, what if your hunch is wrong? I considered that. Unfortunately, in our experience, hunches very rarely turn out to be wrong. Glances were shared between each of them as if expecting someone else to protest or make another comment. I turned to Clarice, believing she was going to say something else, or know me over the head. Surprisingly, the hothead grudgingly kept her mouth shut. Annabeth and I locked eyes and I wanted to thank her for standing up for me. However, I could see in her eyes that she wasn't too eager about all this. Again, I couldn't blame her. Finally, Grover broke the silence. I'm not going to be the first to say hello. I half-heartedly laughed and was about to say that I was going to go over before Talia got in first. Maybe I should break the ice. Sibling connection might help. It was hard to argue with that. After our battle, I might not be the first thing Kratos will want to see unless he wants to look into my eyes to crack my skull in. Geez, it's just like being near this guy turns my mind into a hive of morbid brutality. With no way to turn back now, we all turned and slowly marched over to the trapped beast of a man. He wasn't even struggling to break free of the vines anymore. Instead, his head was hanging low as he stared at the ground. The only movement coming from the thick vines wrapping themselves tighter around him, and hopefully they'll keep doing that. Talia and I stayed in the lead, with Annabeth, Clarice and Nico not too far behind, and Grover staying at the back. He would like me to think that he was covering our rear from any surprise attacks. Once we were close enough to hear Kratos' muffled breathing, we stopped in our tracks and looked at each other. I nodded to Talia, and she took a single step forward. Kratos, I am Talia, daughter of Zeus. Suddenly, Kratos jerked, only a little bit, but that was enough for all of us to jump back. A shriek echoed behind us, and we turned around to see that Grover had hopped into Clarice's arms, hooking his arms around her neck and holding tightly while she glared at him with daggers in her eyes. He looked at her and chuckled nervously before poking her biceps. Just checking your reflexes. Oh, for God's sakes, she grunted and dropped Grover to the ground. The satyr landed with a loud thud, but he'll be fine. Well, now that we got that mini heart attack moment out of the way, we looked back towards Kratos. His head was raised slightly, still appearing dazed and confused. But there was something else that stood out above everything else, and Nico was the one to ask. Wasn't his eyes red? They were, I replied. His breathing was ragged and harsh like he had just gargled nails. Maybe it's like a protein snack for him. As long as he remained in place it suited me just fine. I think he was trying to speak because his lips were flapping about, but it took a while before words were able to leave. Where am I? I furrowed my eyebrows. The confusion was practically radiating off of us. Currently standing in the middle of a forest that you broke, I replied. The mist in his eyes cleared, making me afraid that he was starting to come around. However, he seemed to be just as baffled about everything as we were. After what felt like forever, He lifted his head so that he was able to make eye contact with me. Despite his calmer demeanor, he still looked like he wanted to twist my head around exorcist style. "Who are you?" he growled. Swiftly, Clarice answered with a smug expression. "The demigods that took you down." Grover whimpered. "Clarice, stop antagonizing the 7-foot albino Hulk, please. What are you worried about? He's trapped." I chose to ignore her taunts. We needed answers, and she clearly wasn't in the mood for an interrogating, not even to play the bad cop to my good cop. I could see something seem to click in the back of Kratos's mind, like he was trying to put the pieces to the puzzle together himself. Demigods. Children. His face darkened as he returned his glare towards Talia and I. "What is the meaning of all this?" "We were hoping you could answer that for us," Talia said. "You've supposedly been dead for thousands of years, and then you just show up out of nowhere and go on a rampage big enough to get the gods' attention." "The gods of Olympus are dead," he snarled, a hint of satisfaction in his tone. "I made sure of that." Before Talia or I could say anything else, Annabeth raised her voice. "You did, but they come back. Like they always do." Kratos seemed to acknowledge her presence more than anyone else, his gaze fixed on her for longer than I would have liked. I know those eyes. You are a daughter of Athena, are you not?" Bravely, Annabeth nodded, and I felt the need to stand a bit closer to her, afraid of something snapping in the crazed brute. The wise girl, on the other hand, didn't appear intimidated in the slightest. "I know the role my mother played in your vengeance against the gods." Kratos scoffed. "Does it make you proud? Knowing what a conniving mind she has?" "No, it doesn't make me proud. But I'm not my mother, even if it feels like I try to act that way. But that's enough about me. You're not innocent in this bloodbath either. The gods betrayed me. They used me for their own personal gain and self-gratification. I was a puppet to them." Hate to say it, but I could see where he was coming from. Of course, I would never go far enough to the point where I would literally tear down everything in my path. We needed to address the big chimera in the room and get answers. Hesitantly, I took a step forward, drawing his attention towards me. "We have some questions for you. Why should I waste my time listening to the words of naive children?" "Well, first of all, you're not going anywhere anytime soon. Secondly, we want to get to the bottom of this mystery. Like Talia mentioned, you're supposed to be dead. So either you're the most jacked up zombie to ever live, or you've got some explaining to do." If his eyes were daggers, he would be stabbing me repeatedly with them right now. At least that's better than him using his real daggers on me. I'm used to threatening glares by this point in my life. There was a moment where I was afraid he wasn't going to bother with explaining himself because he turned his gaze elsewhere, still making no attempt to break free. But I think he was just as desperate for answers as we were, because soon enough, he appeared to be deep in thought. I could imagine his life playing for him in his mind. Most likely a supercut of blood, guts, and a larger gathering of monsters than at a satyr barbecue. "Sorry, Grover. The sword," he finally spoke. His tone was distant. I could practically see him drifting through his foggy memory trying to find his way around. "I remember the sword. The sword of Olympus," Annabeth said. "The weapon he used to fight Zeus." Kratos continued. "I used it on myself. After I opened Pandora's box, I used the sword on myself." "Literal overkill," Nico muttered. Feeling brave and stupid, I took another step forward. Fortunately for me, Kratos was too busy rummaging through his memories to pay me much attention. "What do you remember after that?" "Nothing. There has to be more to it than that," I pleaded. I was really pushing my luck standing so close to him, even if he was trapped within the thick vines. I could feel the others behind me wanting to pull me back and probably ensnare me in my own set of vines so that I wouldn't go and get myself killed. But we had him here and he was talking, if not to us then at least he was trying to figure things out for himself. His face scrunched up and his teeth gritted together. Pain overwhelming him as if diving back into his memories was hurting him. I saw lights. I was weak. I didn't know where I was going. All I knew was that I was still alive and kept pushing forward. Then there was a voice. A voice, I questioned. Behind me, the others mumbled. "Lights. A voice. We sure this guy didn't die?" Grover asked. "Perhaps I did," Kratos surprisingly responded. Because I remember feeling the fires of Tartarus. I could hear the wails of the souls. You never forget that sound. Too true, Nico stated. Whenever Dad wants me to visit I have to remember to bring headphones. Guys, I called back to them. We can do without the commentary over the story. Annabeth moved next to me, never taking her eyes off of Kratos. Did you hear the voice before or after you entered Tartarus? I don't know. I don't even know how I entered that accursed place. It felt like a dream. A dream that would never end. He paused, his head twitched slightly. The voice, it said that the gods were still alive and that they were the ones keeping me in Tartarus. Mocking me from afar. My rage boiled to the point my blood was on fire and my bones turned to steel. I vowed to escape and return to finish what I started. The voice incited my fury, telling me to pursue my goal. So this voice told you to go after our parents? I asked. He didn't answer me, too deep in his own thoughts to react to me. He was remembering for his own benefit rather than to help us. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that Annabeth was also trying to work everything out. Her eyes shifting from left to right. The voice lied to you. We didn't even know you were alive until your return. I turned back to Kratos. Who did the voice belong to? Did you get a name? Yes. I refused to listen until he said his name, Kratos said, locking eyes with me. I could feel myself being pushed away just from looking at this guy. I know not of what creature he could be, only that he claimed to be just as much an enemy of the gods as I was. He said his name was Bob. It got so quiet I think I could literally hear crickets chirping in the background as we all stood around confounded. I'm surprised no one broke into a laugh, although Clarice did break her record silent streak. Well, that just sucked away all the fear and tension immediately. I agreed with her for once. There was a high probability that this voice was masking his identity, or there was a Greek monster that was desperate for a name change and went to the high court to sign the paperwork. Bob wasn't exactly your traditional. Wait, hold on. Actually, there was someone I knew who wasn't originally named Bob, but I remember going by that name nowadays. I turned around to face Nico, and I could see the realization hit him just as quickly. You don't think? He inquired. I think so, I replied. Iapetus the Titan. A Titan, Kratos barked. Clarice raised her arms. Wait a minute, who? Nico answered. Iapetus was a Titan that went into the underworld to steal the sword of Hades. Percy and I managed to stop him. Well, Percy actually defeated him by dragging him into the river Lethe. He was brainwashed and Percy ended up telling him that his name was Bob and he was offered a job in the underworld. Seriously, what? You think I made up that story? Nico shot back. Before an argument could break out between them, Annabeth stepped in to stop them. It makes the most logical sense. Somehow, Iapetus must have gotten his memory back and vowed revenge against the gods, and he decided to use Kratos to accomplish this. Not to mention it answers how Kratos has stayed alive for this long. What better help to live for longer than the Titan of mortal life? Everything was fitting together. It was the perfect setup, and I would have never considered it since the last time I saw him. He seemed harmless and even healed a wound I had at the time while saying, "Owie." Kratos' harsh breathing increased in volume and speed. I was almost afraid that the guy would literally explode with rage at having been duped yet again for the benefit of others, not that I was going to say something like that to his face if I wanted to keep my limbs attached. To be fooled by a Titan once more, I will find him and destroy him. We'll find Iapetus, I told him. You, meanwhile, will stay here until we figure out what to do with you. A look of smugness grew on his face as he stared harder at me. You think you can stop me? You are just children. I shouldn't have to waste my time with you. Not wanting to back down from a taunting contest, Clarice stepped closer. Well, these children kicked your crusty butt and have you trapped with nowhere to go. He scoffed. I was disorientated. I had no control of my actions. You were merely fighting a shell of myself. This won't hold me for long. And why is that? I asked. Right, remember when I mentioned earlier how I was afraid he would literally explode with rage? Well, I was half right. Before any of us could blink, Kratos slowly clenched his body tighter, tucking his arms inwards and then suddenly erupted with a bellowing roar. His large, muscular arms broke through the thick vines with hardly any effort. Those that weren't instantly ripped to shreds were torn from the very ground beneath us. The force of his escape was so great that the impact sent us flying backwards, myself included. I crashed to the cracked ground back first. I wanted to spring to my feet to defend the others, however, I was unable to move as Kratos towered over me with the tip of his blade pointed to my neck. Because if I wanted, I could have broken out a long time ago, he stated coldly. Then why didn't you? I stayed out of pity for your sake. Did he just taunt me? Although I couldn't move, I could see the shadows of the others returning to their feet and readying their weapons. None of them was able to come close though, considering I was being held hostage at this point. If any of you take another step closer, Kratos warned, I will slit his throat. We'd like to see you try. Clarice challenged. My stomach did a somersault and crashed into the side of the pool. No, we don't want to see him try. I called out. I felt a bit better hearing Annabeth be the next one to try her hand at negotiating. Look, just let him go. You have no reason to kill him. Because of his blade being so close to my neck, I couldn't turn around to see the others, so I had to go with reading Kratos's expression. Which isn't really one of my strongest aspects, even if this guy was easier to read than most. Stab, beheading, I got the basics of his character. The only movement from him was the slow heaving of his chest every time he breathed, and his eyes gazing around at my friends. Finally, he glanced down to me, and for a split second, I thought that this was the end. I wanted to act brave, but deep down I was as scared as I've ever been. I didn't want to look away if he was going to kill me, I was going to look him in the eye until the very last moment. I guess I do have a cryptic poet inside of me waiting to come out. My heart jumped when his blade moved quickly, not in my direction, though. He hooked his blade around the buckle of his belt before turning heel and walking off into the distance. You're beneath me. I have more important matters to attend to, such as hunting down a titan. Fine by me, I mumbled, not sure if he even heard me. His back was turned to us as he walked past the broken trees and disappeared into the fog that slowly started to sweep in. We could have had the opportunity to attack him, though that might do more harm than good. We found Annabeth and we've got the answers we need to unlocking this mystery, so I'll take that as a win in my book. I sighed heavily with relief before slumping back down onto the ground and gazing up at the sky. My heart was still racing faster than the editing for a blockbuster film. Shadows were cast over me and I saw the others stare down with a mixture of amusement and worry. I think that's enough near-death experiences for today. Grover extended his hand. I'm sorry, I thought that I had him. I grabbed him and he helped me up onto my still trembling legs. Don't worry about it, we're all still alive, so that's what matters. No thanks to me, Annabeth said with a hushed and broken tone. I'm sorry that I ran off without you. It was foolish, I wasn't acting myself. Clarice smirked. Guess Jackson's stupidness has rubbed off on you. What? I mumbled. I wouldn't have done something like that. Yeah, you would have. They all answered simultaneously, causing me to laugh. My first sincere laugh of the day. I took one last glance in the direction Kratos was heading. He was completely out of sight by this point. I wondered if it was the wisest choice to let him go. No, it probably wasn't. But it's not like we had the power to stop him anyway. Besides, as long as he keeps all, and I mean all, of his pent-up rage directed towards one person, then that is fine with me. I felt Annabeth bump shoulders with me and take my hand in hers. It felt so warm and fit like a glove. Come on, let's head back to camp. She smiled. With a grateful nod, we all started to walk back. Next to me, I saw Talia patted a disgruntled Clarice on the back. Don't be so discouraged. Not many can say that they faced Kratos and lived to tell the tale. Not even your father. She froze, immediately regretting saying that, especially when the warrior girl turned to face her. I'm sorry, that was uncalled for. You're right, Clarice replied with a confident grin. I've got one over my dad at something. It's good to have bragging rights. Grover tapped me on the shoulder and leant in closer to whisper so that only Annabeth and I would hear. Why do I get the feeling we're never going to hear the end of this? She was a big help. Does that mean she deserves to brag about it 24/7? Oh no, that's going to get annoying. I just said she was a big help. We hadn't even left the remains of the dried-up stream when we were faced with a new problem. Without any warning, a dozen skeletal arms burst out from the cracks of the ground around us. We all froze on the spot and watched as more and more arms popped out like meerkats. "Nico," I turned to him. He shook his head. "I'm not doing this." Soon enough, we found ourselves surrounded by armored skeletons crawling out from the cracks. All of them armed with swords, shields, axes and anything else that can be used to maim a demigod. We all took our battle stances and moved so that we were back to back. Just when I thought that this day would actually end. Within seconds, there were about 24 bony fiends staring us down like predators that had just cornered their prey. They didn't make any noise. The only sound we heard was the jingling and rattling of their armor and the occasional skeleton that would clang their melee weapon and shield together in an attempt to intimidate us. Not that they needed it because we were intimidated enough already. The next sound we heard was surprising, someone clapping. All of us turned to the source of the clapping and saw one person, not a skeleton, walking towards us. "Bravo, bravo, you were as resourceful as ever." "Iapetus," Nico hissed. He looked at Nico with a sinister smirk. "And the son of Hades too. You've brought the whole gang with you. Then again, I suppose you would have needed to. You may be a stubborn one, Percy Jackson, but even you would have been at your limit fighting Kratos yourself." I unclicked Riptide and prepared myself for the inevitable fight. "How did you get your memory back?" His face darkened and his smirk twisted upside down. "Oh yes, don't think I haven't forgotten what happened the last time we fought." Grover raised his arm. "Actually, that was the point. You were supposed to forget." "Silence," Iapetus yelled. It was time for the Titans to take their rightful place and rule once more. The sword of Hades would have been essential to that plan. But instead, you not only thwarted my plans but dragged me into the river Lethe, erased my memory, and then further ruined my dignity by having me masqueraded as someone else with an infuriating name. Do you know how embarrassing it is, even after I get my memory back, that people still address me as Bob? "I'll ask again," I ignored his rambling. "How did you get your memory back?" "You have Kronos to thank for that. After yet again you defeated him, he was sent plummeting into the furthest depths of Tartarus. Before he was gone, he found me and helped me regain my memories. I wanted revenge, but I knew that I couldn't do it alone. And with almost all of the Titans either missing or destroyed, I needed a new card to play. So you used Kratos to achieve your goal. Once again, using someone else to do your dirty work." He shrugged his shoulders. "As long as it gets the job done. It was simple. Use the very warrior who had already defeated the gods before to do it again. But, like always, you keep getting in the way." I have a habit of doing that. Despite my digs at his ego, he still found a chance to smile at me, and that made me feel incredibly uneasy. The plan might not have worked, and now I have a maniac after my head, but I'll make sure that today isn't a total waste. The least I can do is kill you and everyone you care about. Yeah, I was afraid that was what you were going to say. Having said his piece, Iapetus raised his arm high into the air, no doubt readying to signal his warriors to strike. This was the last thing we needed after our fight with Kratos. Everyone was still tired and wounded, or both. I was doing better than most, but that was only because of the water I used in the previous battle. I don't know how much longer I can last now that there was no stream to draw water from. Iapetus sliced his arm downwards and the skeletal battalion charged at us. Because they were coming at us from all angles, we tried our best to stand our ground and stay back to back for as long as possible, hopefully, take down a few of their numbers before targeting the big fish himself. With Riptide in one hand and my watch shield in the other, I blocked and parried against two skeletons that went after me. I held them in place, clearly much stronger than they were because of me actually have muscles over my bones, and I kicked at one of their knees, causing it to stumble onto the ground. With one down, I spun around and sliced the other around the midriff, separating his top half from the bottom. They were both on the ground, so I thought that was the end of it. However, the crippled skeletons just kept swinging their swords from the ground at me. What they lacked in muscle strength, muscles at all, they more than made up for with persistence. Iapetus laughed maniacally as he watched all of us struggle to defend ourselves. Clarice was enjoying herself at first, gladly tearing away at the skeletons and hacking off their arms and legs, until she realized that it was ineffective and she was pretty much fighting them even if they only had one leg to stand on. Next to me, Annabeth jabbed her dagger against their joints and twisted, causing them to fall to pieces. Even then, they would just start crawling around to keep fighting. One of them even used his arm to pick up the other arm that was holding his sword to continue. We were forced out of our positions as we weaved around out of the way of their strikes. I heard Grover play his flute and call upon more vines to wrap around the bones so tightly they were crushed. Gruesome, yet effective and bloodless. However, he would concentrate on one and end up getting surrounded by 3 more. Talia and Nico tried to work off each other, with her defending the son of Hades as he tried to take some kind of control over the undead, but it wasn't working. Iapetus must have done some dodgy dealing in the underworld to keep control of these particular warriors. I guess he was prepared just in case he encountered Nico again. It was soon becoming clear though that everyone was tired. We were still doing our best to block, however, there would be occasions where someone would take the full battering of a shield or get shoved to the ground. I was in the best shape, so I needed to take most of the fighting. I hurried over and kicked a skeleton that was attacking Annabeth from behind. It scattered into pieces before dropping to the ground. Wasting no time, the bones were hopping like rabbits in my direction. They were never ending. "Percy," Annabeth called and gestured for me to look at Iapetus. "He must be controlling them. If we defeat him, we might be able to stop them." I nodded. "I'll take care of him." As quickly as I could, I charged towards the confident Titan. He watched the battle with great pleasure, his arms folded and looking like he didn't have a care in the world. Over my shoulder, I saw Clarice's spear thrown towards him. He still didn't bat an eye or attempt to maneuver out of the way. Out of nowhere, a skeleton leapt in the line of fire and took the spear for his master. The weapon crashed through his skull and stayed in place. I didn't stop. I couldn't afford to waste 1 second. The spear skeleton noticed me and rushed towards me. Reacting quickly, I grabbed the handle of the spear still embedded in his skull and threw it to the side. His head came clean off, leaving a lost, stumbling body. Bam! I punched it out of the way, leaving me with a clear line towards Iapetus. "Do you think it'll be that easy?" he threatened. My survival instincts went into overdrive, and I stopped, noticing in the nick of time 2 skeletons to my left using their shields as battering rams and crashing into me. I felt the wind knocked out of me and I rolled along the ground. I was worried that my ribcage might have been crushed in. Once I was sure I could move, I tried to get back up, only for a pile of skeleton warriors to stand over me and bring their swords down to cut me to pieces. I held my shield over my body and stopped their joint attack, but now I was being held down and trapped. If it were just 1 or even 2 I would have pushed them off, but just when I felt I could lift them off me, more would appear out of nowhere and push their weapons down on me. I could do with the stream to magically fill up with water right now. I struggled to hold them back as I noticed the Titan walk over and glare down at me like I was discarded trash. "This is the end for you, Percy Jackson. You and all your friends." My body shuddered at the mention of my friends. Using all my strength, I could only turn my head to look over and see them valiantly fight on. However, they were on their last ropes. Clarice swung her sword to slice away at 2 of them, only for one to sneak up behind her and crash the hilt of his axe against her head, drawing blood. Annabeth was on her knees, swinging her dagger and a sword wildly to fend off more soldiers as she defended Grover. Nico took a hard punch to the stomach before retaliating with a punch of his own, knocking the skull off its shoulders. Not that it did anything to stop the body from still attacking. Talia used a skeleton as a body shield to keep her distance against 3 more. Though a skeleton was the worst kind of body shield, because the others just jabbed their weapons through the gaps in his chest and stomach to try and hit her. I brought my attention back to Iapetus when I heard him laughing darkly. "It was impressive that you were able to hold off Kratos, but this is as far as you go. You know that Kratos is still going to hunt you down," I grunted. My shield was pushed down right on top of me, crushing my arms against my chest. "What are you going to do when he finds you?" "I'll worry about that fool later," he replied. "I was able to trick him once, who's to say I couldn't do it again? That behemoth is all brawn and no brains. He's as stupid warriors can get. He will be my puppet to use with as I please, and there is nothing he can do to." He stopped with his speech. His bottom lip quivered and his eyes bulged outwards. The skeletons and I looked at him to see what was wrong, and I couldn't stop a grin from growing on my face when I saw the large, pale white hand grip the Titan's shoulder forcefully. Iapetus slowly turned until he was face to face with the man of the hour himself, and he did not look happy, although I'm thinking that was just his default face. In his other hand, Kratos held his blade, shining brightly and ready for blood. Even the skeletons holding me down were frozen on the spot. Iapetus gulped and forced a laugh. No, I was referring to the other Kratos. BAAM. Faster than the eye could see, the hand on Iapetus's shoulder clenched tightly and rocketed to his cheek. Blood, drool, and I think a tooth flew out of his mouth and he was sent soaring and crashed into a nearby tree, nearly breaking it in half. Kratos didn't even take the time to enjoy that really cool moment and chased after the Titan. I realized that the skeletons were still distracted. I kicked outwards, snapping all of their legs and causing them to fall to the ground. I spun around and pushed myself upwards. I swung Riptide as hard and as fast as I could, hitting each of them across the head, smashing their skulls into hundreds of pieces. Once I knew they were taken care of, I turned around to see Kratos prowling towards Iapetus. Despite the brutal punch he took, the Titan got back up, using the broken pieces of bark from the tree to help. He cowered away when he saw Kratos advancing towards him. Before he got too close, more skeletons leapt from nowhere and climbed all over Kratos. He roared at the top of his voice and thrashed around, throwing a few of them off. The ones that held on tightly raised their swords to try and strike him down. Leaping into action, I hurried over and slashed Riptide at the closest one before it could stab Kratos. I don't even think that would even be effective against Kratos, still, I didn't want to take the chance. He was our best bet of fighting off this horde, so I needed him in one piece. Kratos jabbed his blades into two skeletons on his shoulders and slammed them both into the ground, burying them beneath the rubble. I smashed another one off his back with my shield, and he grabbed the last remaining one, holding his entire skull in the palm of his hand before crushing it into dust. Yeah, I'm glad I didn't fight this guy when he was at full strength. Panicking, Iapetus turned to the group still fighting with my friends. Leave them and protect me. Kill these two. He pointed towards Kratos and me. Obediently, all of the remaining skeletons ignored my friends and charged in our direction. At least I knew that the others were safe for now. I'll handle this myself, Kratos said to me. I'm a part of this whether you like it or not. I'm staying to fight. He didn't reply. He didn't even look in my direction, instead of keeping his sight on the charging horde coming our way. Despite the overwhelming numbers, I actually felt pretty confident with my chances knowing who was standing by my side, even if he was a reluctant participant to this team-up. Kratos took a mighty step forward, twisted his body to the side before swinging his blade outwards, the chain extending to an insane distance. He sliced through the first wave with no trouble. That left the second wave to head right for us. The closest one drove his axe down at me. I ducked underneath, blocked with my shield and pushed him away. I slid my foot across the ground and tripped the next skeleton, knocking his foot off. While I had to deal with one at a time, Kratos was making short work of them one wave at a time. Just a single punch was enough to grind their bones into particles or sending them flying over the horizon. Even if they didn't go soaring away, he would toss his blade into them and pull back onto the chain to slam them into another one. He seemingly defied the laws of physics. Then again, laws of physics and Greek mythology don't go hand in hand. Iapetus watched on helplessly as Kratos and I defeated every single skeleton that came our way. Kratos would finish off any that I broke or crippled. One that tried to crawl away after I hacked off his legs had Kratos's foot slammed on top of him. It felt like we were defeating an entire army single-handedly even if their numbers didn't seem to be dwindling at all. Then I remembered Annabeth mentioning Iapetus and how if we defeat him, that would be the end of it. I couldn't get close enough to him to finish this, but I knew someone who could. Taking a chance, I jumped in between two skeletons, holding one off with Riptide and the other with my shield. I created an opening for Kratos. Go, I called out, hoping he wasn't going to ignore me. Kratos turned and without a word, charged in my direction. His speed was incredible, so I had to act fast if I didn't want to get trampled on. Just as he got close enough, I jumped upwards and twisted my body, giving him the space to move past me whilst I swung riptide and cleaved off the skulls of the two skeletons I was holding and landed nicely back onto my feet. I could just picture a perfect judge's score of 10 for sticking the landing. Iapetus barely had any time to react before Kratos reached him, grabbing him by the throat before lifting him over his head and throwing him back down onto the ground. Quickly, Kratos picked him up again and this time tried to throw him in between the cracks and beneath the earth. Iapetus held out his arms and stopped himself from falling into the bottomless hole. He held on for dear life, but that wasn't going to do him much good, especially with Kratos looming over him. "Wait, don't do it," the Titan begged. "We can work together and take down the gods, for real this time." "I swear it." Empty words from a beaten man, Kratos scowled. He lifted his foot up and stamped on Iapetus's stomach, causing the Titan to let go and send him plummeting into the darkness below, screaming and cursing our names as he disappeared from sight. Even though he was out of the picture, the skeletons weren't stopping. I was afraid for a moment that the fighting would continue until I heard Nico cry out, "That's enough." He raised his hands towards the skeletons and they instantly stopped. We watched and waited anxiously to see what would happen. I flinched when one of the skeletons finally moved, only for it to scratch the back of its skull in confusion. They were like lost puppies, looking around and wondering how they got here. I almost felt bad about the ones that I disintegrated earlier, almost. They did still try to kill me after all. That docks quite a few sympathy points. I hurried over to the others checking to see if they were okay. We were all beaten and bruised, and most like weren't going to be sleeping comfortably in our beds tonight. But at least we were alive to go back to our beds and hibernate until the next century if we were lucky. I helped Annabeth to her feet and she wrapped her arms around me, hugging tightly, and I was more than happy to return the gesture. "Percy," she whispered in my ear after a few seconds passed. I moved away from her and saw that she was looking past me, towards Kratos. I turned around to see him yet again walking away into the distance. "Wait," I called out before rushing over towards him. "Where are you going now?" "That's of no concern to you," he retorted without stopping. "If you're going to be hunting down or hunting others, it does concern me. You've beaten Iapetus, so what are you going to do now?" He finally stopped walking and stayed in place, not looking around to face me. I was scared he was about to begin round 2. Judging by the sounds of the others behind me gripping their weapons tighter, I wasn't the only one feeling this way. I couldn't tell what this guy was going to do now. Chills ran down my spine when I saw him twist his head to the side a little, still not looking to me, and I couldn't see his face, but he was at least acknowledging me to some degree. "I will find my own path. With no gods or titans to get in my way. If they stay out of my way, then there will be no blood spilt." I considered his words and nodded. "Fair enough." "Whoa, whoa, whoa," Clarice gasped. "You don't believe that, do you? What, is he going to walk into Starbucks and start a new life there?" Grover shrugged his shoulders. "Why not? The Minotaur in Daedalus's labyrinth reformed and became an ambassador for anti-bull fighting." "That didn't happen," she shot back at the satyr. Focusing my attention back towards Kratos, I did worry what would happen if he did go vengeance-seeking like before. But if he wanted to be like that, why wouldn't he just kill us here and now? After all the talk I've heard about him from the others and seeing how powerful he can become when taking a fight seriously, I was expecting something a bit more monstrous. But honestly, fighting side by side with him, it felt fine. I didn't feel scared or unsafe. He wasn't giving me that vibe anymore. "We'll hold you to that word, Kratos," I shouted towards him gratefully. "Thanks again." He didn't move or say anything to me, remaining still for a few seconds, before silently walking away and disappearing into the fog once more. "Yeah, I guess it was too much to expect a you're welcome," I mumbled. "Well, he didn't kill you," Talia said. "Maybe that's his way of saying thank you." Once we got back to Camp Half-Blood, we were the talk of the town. Everyone wanted to ask us about what happened, and how we managed to battle the one known as Kratos. We were celebrities amongst celebrities. As much as we tried to enjoy it, all we wanted to do was rest up and take a long, well-deserved nap. Although, Chiron wanted to have a quick word with us before we had any hope of relaxing. It was actually more intimidating waiting for him to scowl us than preparing for a battle with Kratos. "Okay, probably not," I just wanted to make a comparison. We explained to Chiron about what happened. From Kratos' appearance to how Iapetus was using him to take down the gods. He would then go forth to send a message to the gods about what happened and what we did. It was too much to expect a pat on the back, especially considering Kratos was still alive and about without any indication of his whereabouts. I just gave my word that he would stay out of harm's way, and if he did step out of line, I would be the one to take him down. Even if I hadn't thought of that myself, the gods weren't going to let me go until I agreed to that term. As for Iapetus, Nico would tell me that Hades has given him a very special task of making sure the river Lethe was cleaned and checked daily for any drainage problems. It's a win-win really whether he does a good job or not. Apparently, if he does fall in, his new name that he'll be given with his erased memory is Babidi Babidi Boo. That's more motivation to do his job correctly than any salary. Later, I managed to give my mum a call and let her know that I was safe and sound. I can expect more hugs when I get back home. For now, I was happy sitting with Annabeth by the lake in Camp Half-Blood and watching the sunset. It felt so peaceful to sit by the water, letting my feet sink into the sand as the gentle waves brushed my ankles, with my girlfriend occasionally foot wrestling me. I glanced over, wanting to look at her radiating in the setting sun when I noticed something. "Hey, you're wearing your necklace." "Yeah," she exclaimed happily, holding it in her fingers. I never got a chance to before the whole Kratos situation happened. "It looks good on you." "Alright, you've already given me a present, you don't have to flatter me too." "What if I want to flatter you?" She grinned. I was surprised she didn't respond to my question, even if I did mean it in a rhetorical way. On the one hand, I thought that I might have outsmarted her with my wit, on the other, I knew that she was deep in thought about something. "What's up?" Realizing that I had caught her out, Annabeth's lip curled upwards and she gazed out over the water's horizon. "Something about Iapetus' story doesn't add up." "Like what?" "We assumed that Iapetus had kept Kratos alive after he struck himself with the sword of Olympus. But he claimed to have only used Kratos for his own end after he got his memory back. Very recently." I figured out what she was saying, and I felt stumped. She was right. Kratos was alive. She nodded affirmatively. Long before Iapetus controlled him. He's gone all these years without any of the Greek gods realizing it. He had so much time to plan his revenge, but he never acted on it. I think you might have made the right call. If he hasn't done anything yet, why would he start again now? But, then what was he doing for all those centuries? I doubt he could have been a hermit for that long. Who knows? Aren't you supposed to be the wise girl? I don't have an answer for everything, seaweed brain. She taunted and playfully shoved me. I hummed. Okay, you don't have the answer all the time. But you do always have the right answer. A genuine laugh escaped her. Now you're really overdoing it with the flattery. I laughed with her and found myself gaze out towards the horizon too. It really hadn't occurred to me until Annabeth pointed it out. Kratos was alive for so long, what could have happened to him in that time? Maybe it was during that time his anger towards the gods quelled. I don't think even Kratos has the answer to that question. But wherever he was now, hopefully he'll find something better. Something not so violent. Oh, who am I kidding? He's probably chopping of Hydra heads this very second. Like a true demigod. Maybe we do have quite a bit in common. The end. Now we will see you in the next video.